Children, whatever I taught you in the video, a clear concept I'll make through my audio session. So let us open chapter 10, page number 95, that is motion and measurement of distances. So I'll read the textbook. You also read along with me, make it clear each and every line, and then we'll go to the question answer. So let us start. There was a general discussion among the children in Paheli and Buju's class about the places they had visited during the summer vacations. Someone had gone to their native village by a train, then a bus, and finally a bullock cart. One student had travelled by an aeroplane. Another spent many days of his holidays going on fishing trips in his uncle's boat. So there was a discussion about Paheli and Buju's class about the places they went to, they went in during their summer vacation. Same way as I asked you where all you went, how you travelled, same way they were having a discussion. And they said some have travelled by train, some have travelled by a bus, and finally a bullock cart. One student had travelled by an aeroplane also. So it depends upon the distance of the place, how far. If the place is very far, they have to travel by aeroplane. If it is little more closer, they can travel by train, then comes in through a bus, and finally a bullock cart. Another spent many days of his holidays. Another one more person has spent holidays in uncle's boat, having a fishing trips. Next paragraph. The teacher then asked them to read newspaper articles that mentioned about small wheeled vehicle that moved on the soil of Mars and conducted experiments. These vehicles were taken by spacecraft all the way to Mars. So teacher has asked to read the newspaper article where it was mentioned a small wheeled vehicle that moved onto Mars and it conducted many experiments. So what was that? A spacecraft. Next paragraph. Meanwhile, Paheli had been reading stories about ancient India and wanted to know how people travelled from one place to another in earlier times. So Paheli was reading many stories about ancient time. Suddenly she wanted to know how the people were travelled from one place to another in ancient time. Next topic is story of transport. Long ago, people did not have any means of transport. They used to move only on foot and carry goods on their back. Later on, they began to use animals for transportation. That means, long ago in ancient time, there was no mode of transport. There was no vehicles. They just walk and go from one place to another. They used to carry goods on their back. Then later on, when they started traveling a long distance, they started getting tired maybe, and they began to use animals for their travel or to carry their goods. Next paragraph. For transport through water routes, routes, boats were used from ancient time. To begin with boats were simple logs of wood in which a hollow cavity could be made. Later, people learned to put together different pieces of wood and give shapes to the boats. These shapes imitated the shapes of the animals living in water. Recall our discussion of this streamlined shape of fish in chapters 8 and 9. So, in an ancient time, for transport, water routes, boats were used for the transportation. So to begin the transport, it started with boats made of simple logs of wood in which a hollow cavity, small gaps will be there, could be made. Hollow cavity means, hollow means simply empty. It will be an empty thing. Later, people learned to put together different pieces of wood and give shapes to the boats. Then they learned to make or give shapes to the boats by putting together all the pieces of wood. These shapes imitated the shape of animal like fish. This shape is known as streamlined shape. Next, invention of the wheel made a great change in modes of transport. The design of the wheel was improved over thousands of years. Animals were used to pull carts that moved on wheels. So after the invention of wheel, it brought a great change in the transportation, because the traveling will be, the time will be consumed. It will be a time consuming. Otherwise, it will be time consuming if you walk and go, or if you use animals, it will be time consuming. After the invention of the wheel, the time was less. And the design of wheel was improving for over thousands of years. And animals were used to pull carts, which are made on wheels. Next, until the beginning of the 19th century, people still depended on animals, boats, and ships to transport them from place to place. The invention of steam engine led to the development of new means of transport. Railroads were made for steam engine, driven carriages, and wagons. Later came automobiles such as motor cars, trucks, and buses. Motorized boats and ships were used as means of transport on water. The early years of 19th century saw the development of aeroplanes. These were later improved to carry passengers and goods. Electric trains, monorails, supersonic aeroplanes, and spacecraft are some of the contributions of the 20th century. So till the 19th century, people were dependent on animals, boats, and ships for their transportation. Then the invention of steam engine came. It led the development of new means of transportation. Railroads were made for steam engine, driven carriages, and wagons. So railroads were made. Then later came automobile cars. Automobiles such as motor car, truck, buses, all these things comes. Then comes motorized boat, ships. That were the water transport. Then early of 19th century, aeroplane were developed. Then these were later improved to carry passengers and goods. Then comes electric train, monorail, all these things were invented. Last paragraph, figure 10.1. You can see the figure 10.1 is the page number 95. Figure 10.1, you can just look on it. Okay, and shows some of the different modes of transport, isn't it? Bicycle, you can see the bicycle, aeroplane, boat, bullock cart, bus, and the train. Place them in the correct order from the earliest modes of transport to the most recent. So I have shown you a video of that story of transport. According to that, you can do this in your textbook. Are there any of the early modes of transport that are not in use today? Among this mode of transportation, can you name any one, or can you tell me any one mode of transport which is not used today? Today we are not using. Which one is that? Can you name that among this? Yes, bullock cart. Bullock cart nowadays is not used. All the transport are used. Next is, how wide is this disc? So, how did people know how far they have traveled? How will you know whether you can walk all the way to your school, or whether you will need to take a bus or a rickshaw to reach your school? When you need to purchase something, is it possible for you to walk to the market? How will you know the answers to these questions? So the question is, if you want to go to school, how you know whether you have to take a bus or any other transport? Or if you are going to market, what you have to choose? How will you know? So, it is often important to know how far a place is. As I have already explained in video, that the mode of transport depends upon the distance of the place. Depends upon the distance of the place, how far it is. So if the place is very far from your place, then you have to choose the mode of transport according to that, so that we can have an idea how we are going to reach that place. Walk, take a bus or a train, a ship, an aeroplane, or even a spacecraft. Among this, any one we can choose if we want to travel from one place to another. First, it depends upon the distance of the place. According to that, we can choose our mode of transport. Sometimes there are objects whose length or width we need to know. That means even the objects we need to know the length or width. Just now I explained about the distance of the school, distance of your place, like Kuthuvaramba, or from the school to Kuthuvaramba, or from Talasheri to Kuthuvaramba. Sometimes we need to know the distance between these places. But more than that, sometimes we need to know the length and width of the objects. Next paragraph. In Paheli and Boju's classroom, there are large desks which are to be shared by two Students, Paheli and Buju share one desk but frequently end up objecting that the other is using a larger share of the desk. So here Paheli and Bujus are sharing a table, same way as you share a table among your friends. Same way they were sharing a table between them. So as long they sit and sharing the desk, in between them they start fighting that the other is sharing the large place or large share of the desk. So on the teacher's suggestion, they decided to measure the length of the desk, make a mark exactly in the middle of it, and draw a line to separate the two halves of the desk. So according to the teacher's suggestion, they decided to divide the desk into two halves. Both Paheli and Boju are very fond of playing gilli danda with their friends. Boju brought a set of gilli and danda with him. So, what is gilli danda? It's a game played with two sticks. A large one called a danda, which is used to hit a smaller one, the gilli. The smaller one is known as gilli. It is an ancient sport of India. So they decided to measure using gilli and danda. So here is how they tried to measure the length of the desk using the danda and gilli. You can see the figure 10.2. The desk seems to be having a length equal to 2 dandas length and 2 length of the gilli. That means 2 danda length. Danda means stick. The length of 2 dandas and 2 length of gilli also. 2 danda, 2 gilli length. Drawing a line in the middle of the desk leaves each of them happy with a half of the desk equal to a danda and a gilli in length. After a few days, the marked line gets wiped out. So, with the using a gilli and danda, that is 2 gilli and 2 danda, they made it half and they were happy. In between, the lines or the marked line gets wiped out. So Boju now has a new set of gilli and danda as he lost his old one. Here is how the length of the desk seems to measure using the gilli and danda. Hello. Now when measured with this new set of gilli and danda, so what happened to the old one? As the old one lost. So they brought a new gilli and danda. Now when measured with the new set of gilli and danda, the desk length seems to be about 2 danda length and 1 gilli length with a small length still left out. This is less than 1 gilli length. Now what? So what they did, they brought a new gilli and danda. So they brought a new gilli and danda, and with that they started measuring. So what happened with that is when they measured, it got 2 danda and 1 gilli length, and with a small length still left out. Still a small length is left out. What would you suggest Paheli and Boju to do to measure the length of the whole desk? Can they use a cricket wicket and bails to measure the length, or do you think that this might create the same similar problem? So what can we suggest? What thing they could do is to take a small length of string and mark 2 points on it. So it was become difficult to measure with a gilli and danda because it's not getting equal. So they decided to measure with a string. So they brought a string and marked 2 points on it. This will be a string length. They can measure the width of the disc in string length. So what they did is they fold and measure. Like suppose they have measured one string length. When it folded out, it becomes half. And again when you fold it, become 1/4. And again when you fold it, become 1/8 string lengths. Now perhaps Paheli and Buju can measure the exact length of the disc using the string. You would say that they should use the scale in their geometry box and solve their problem. Yes, of course. Yes. Maybe we think that they could have solved the problem using a scale. Buju had been reading about the way people used to measure distances before such standard scales were made, and he has been trying to follow different methods of measuring distances. So actually, Buju wanted to find out different methods of measuring. There are so many occasions when we come across a need to measure length and distances. The tailor needs to measure the length of the cloth to know if it is enough to stitch a kurta. A carpenter needs to measure the height and width of a cupboard to know how much wood he would need to make its door. The farmer needs to know the length and breadth or the area of his land to know how much seed he can sow and how much water would be needed for his crop. So there are different occasions where we need to measure length. One is important one. The clothes which we are wearing, that is measured by the tailor. Tailor has to measure first the cloth which will fit for this dress or not. Then only he can stitch. Carpenter has to measure the height and width of the cupboard to make cupboard to know how much wood he would need to make its door. He has to first calculate the height and width of the cupboard. Then only he can buy the wood. The farmer needs to know the length and breadth or the area to know how much seed he can sow or how much water he need for the farming. Suppose you are asked how tall you are. You want to tell the length of a straight line from the top of your head to the heel of your feet. How long is this room? How wide is this desk? How far is it from Delhi to Lucknow? How far away is the moon from the earth? So there are different types of questions it is asked, like how long room, how wide desk, how far is the moon, how far is the Delhi to Lucknow? Different questions. What is a common thing do you see in this? That is the distance. All are concerned with distance between two places. The two places may be close enough, like the two ends of a table, or they may be far apart, like Jammu and Kanyakumari. So children, I will explain in the next class.